everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tiffany Benson, one part of Team Benson, and today we're going to do a little bit of a day in my life. In my garden, of course. Now, I get the question a lot, is my garden full sun? And the answer to that is no. So I'm going to kind of show you guys how I take advantage of some of the things that go on in my garden and what I do in order to be able to grow vegetables in my garden, because my garden actually does not get as much sun as most people think. So let's start with what it means to have a full sun garden. It basically means your garden gets I think it's 6 to 8 hours worth of sun, and you get to grow everything. It's all nice and happy, and there's nothing blocking and shading it. So that therefore your garden gets as much photosynthesis as possible, therefore your plants grow quicker. Now my garden does not get anywhere near that. Typically the sun starts hitting parts of my garden. You guys will see there's more growth where my okra is, or my giant tomato plant was, and that's also where I grow my broccoli. That spot gets the most sun, the most usable sun, I'll call it. During the summertime, the side of my garden where my lime tree is and also my patio arch, that side gets the most sun, but the most non-usable sun, because by the time the sun gets to that side, it's blazing hot heat, like 100+ degrees the entire time. The other side, on the other hand, probably around about 10 o'clock, the sun will start to come into that side of my bed. So basically where all of my beds are, that whole row on that side of the wall. And I'll probably get sun there for about maybe a solid 4 hours, 5 hours if I'm lucky. So I want to talk to you guys about kind of what I'm doing in order to make sure that my garden is growing at a decent pace. For today, you're going to see me do a couple different things. One, I am switching up my fertilizer for the summer. And then two, I'm also taking advantage of the cloudy day today. It is still going to be 102 degrees, so it's still going to be hot, but the clouds are going to be out. So if the clouds are out, that basically is your shade cloth, and therefore you don't need more shade cloth on top of the clouds that are already the shade cloth. So I am going to pull back my shade cloth for as much as possible, as much as the sun will let me, and let the clouds filter the sun instead of putting double basically shade cloth on the garden and then reducing a lot of sun. So I'm going to turn this sunny day, or this partly sunny day, into a good thing. Also, I got I call it my summer fertilizer. So this one is Dr. Earth's, and I have used Dr. Earth before in my garden. And I'm noticing that my garden just needs a little bit something more. Normally I use fish fertilizer in my garden, which is a 511. So we're looking at the numbers down here. And that is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate, I think is what the other one is. You guys can let me know down in the comment what it is, because this one says something weird. So those numbers, when you're looking at nitrogen, which is basically what is going to give you the big leafy growth. So during the winter, I use fish fertilizer solely because I want to grow the leaves of my plants, because we're eating the leaves of the plants. So all of the broccolis we're eating, and I want those to get nice and big. The cabbages, the collards, all those different things, we're really growing those for those leaves. So we want those leaves to get huge. Well, in the beginning of the summer and in the spring, when I'm planting my beans and my melons and different things like that, I also want those leaves to get huge, because I want the plant to have as much protection as possible so that it's grown out fully by the time it gets to the super hot heat. But there is a point in time where I want to back off the nitrogen, and I want to give it something a little bit more of the second number, which I believe it's phosphate is the second number. number, but I know the second number is what I'm going for. And that is going to give it more of a concentration to promote growth of like the fruit. So for the plant to be able to grow bigger and better fruit. So I want to take down the nitrogen so the plant's not focusing on the leaf growth and focusing more on the fruit growth. But that's only after my plants start to flower and fruits start to develop. So just remember that when you are planning for your garden. So let's go outside and talk about this little guy. Alright guys, so I've used Dr. Earth's before, and I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of pumps into the garden beds. And then also, I wanted to show you too that now these guys are spending all their time outside now. So see guys, we have a lot of things fruiting. We have the melon over here. We have the okra over here, and then we have some more squash over here. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough food over here to these plants. And I'm also trying to make sure I'm doing fertilizing earlier during the day and not at night. So soon those beans are gonna have their friend. I mean, not in the middle of the day, I meant. Sorry guys, tongue-tied. So especially for this one, before I start adding fertilizer, I'm gonna go ahead and get these eggplants that just never really developed off of here. Alright, so that was simple enough. I just put some squirts into all of my beds, and now I'm just gonna go ahead and water it in. Now I'm hoping that for my cucumber plant, guys, because this cucumber plant, with the sun damage and the worms, I finally got all the worms off of it, but the sun damage is just there. So I'm hoping that maybe it might grow some new leaves, because if you look down here, it keeps growing more cucumbers. So I have a couple more cucumbers going on this plant, and I want to make sure that it photosynthesizes as much as it can. Alright guys, so I wanted to bring you out in the middle of the day because it is noon, and although it is 99 degrees, as you'll see, most of my garden is uncovered, and that's because it is a cloudy day. So normally at 99 degrees, this would be completely wilted. As you can see, this one's starting to wilt, and that's probably because I didn't give it enough water when I was watering. But things like my watermelon, see that watermelon over there, is just really loving life. And a lot of my herbs, like my rosemary's doing really good, my sage is really loving life. They're all super perky. Now they're able to handle the 99-degree day because it's a cloudy day. If it was a regular 99-degree day with no cloud in the sky, then I would 100% have a lot of these covered. But since I don't have a full sun garden, I want to try and get as much sun to my garden as possible. So I'm taking advantage of these cloudy days and letting my garden be open. So look at the eggplant. Eggplant is like, finally, we're not underneath shade cloth. Now some of my things like cucumbers, like this cucumber plant, I'm not covering because I don't want to cover the cantaloupe, which as you can see is not wilted or anything like that. Beans are not as happy though, but this is where I have to start thinking, okay, what is it important and what's going to actually produce me food at the time. The beans are not going to be really happy about 112 degrees next week, so they may or may not make it. So I might try to give them a little bit of shade, but I really don't want to cover up this cantaloupe because I want this cantaloupe to be nice and strong. And these cucumbers are not doing that well because they're in the actual hottest spot of my garden. So I might have to think about maybe removing these and planting something different, like the rattlesnake whole beans that will like the summer a lot better. But everything else, see guys, the corn doesn't even have shade cloth over it, and I will not put shade cloth over it because I'm allowing the corn to get as big as it can enjoy the sun. Even the Armenian cucumber here is enjoying the Arizona sun. Even when it's not cloudy, these two things enjoy the Arizona sun. The okra is underneath a shade cloth here, but not on the front. These ones are, so they're getting a partial shade, which is helping them. And the same thing with this squash too as well. So just really start to think when it comes to your garden, what is going to benefit at what time. And if you pay attention to those things, then you can grow a lot more in your desert garden. Alright, so here was my solution. I covered just half of the arch so that that cucumber plant would be covered, and then I lowered this shade cloth so it would shade some of those beans, and then that way this can still be exposed and get as much sun as it can. And then I also moved this squash over here since it was having the hardest time, because even if I were to water it right now, it really wouldn't make a difference. And I am going to make sure these stay in the shade that they're in. So they're doing good. As you can see, they're loving life right here underneath the umbrella. And then I put up just a little cloth over that squash and over this cucumber. And if the sun changes and if the clouds completely go away and it's full sun, then I will cover my garden. But until then, I'm going to let it get as much sun as possible, because it's going to be hidden when it comes down to the next 2 weeks when it's 118 degrees, I think is what's going to be the hottest we're going to get. Okay, so as you can see for our noon update, the garden is really kind of not suffering. It's not, even though it's really hot outside, the rays are not beaming down on it. Those clouds are really filtering out a lot of that really harshness of the rays, so the garden is actually loving life. Now there are certain things that are just really never going to need a lot of shade cloth in Arizona. Your Armenian cucumbers are going to do just fine. Your corn's going to do just fine. Those are actually full sun, hot temperature garden plants. You know, it's funny because a lot of times we go to like the box stores or the nurseries and things say full sun, and then as desert gardens we know that doesn't mean our full sun. That means everybody else's in the world's full sun but ours, because our full sun is intense and crazy. But there are a couple of things that just really do well in Arizona and they're fine. So those things really don't need shade cloth and probably really never will need shade cloth. Now there are certain things that do need shade cloth, like the okra. The okra needs a filtered light no matter what. So I have it underneath, the same thing with the squash, I have it underneath where my shade cloth is kind of permanent for right now, to where it's always going to get filtered. Now it does get blasted more so with the sun coming in forward on it, and the same thing with the sun coming in forward on the squash. So I do normally put a shade cloth in front of it too as well. But today I kept it up since it's cloudy and it's not that crazy of sun. So just one of those things to think about when you guys are planning out your garden. Maybe put things in different positions, that if you can take advantage of a cloudy day, you can totally do that with your garden if your garden isn't full sun. And for those crops that are going to be okay with those really hot temperatures, let them be. Now I do have my corn and my Armenian cucumber on the side of my garden that is going to get shaded out in the middle of the day, like, well, the hottest part of the day I'll say, but still when it comes down to August, those are still going to be in there. They're hopefully going to be producing corn and Armenian cucumbers, and it's going to be roughly around 116, 118. Please God, not 120. Alright guys, so this is a 2 o'clock update, and as you can see, the sun is already starting to set, kind of, well, shade my garden. So this is still looking good. I still kept this up, and as you can see, that one bounced back with the shade. I left this one open because basil does well, and this is now all in shade now, so this is all starting to perk back up, as well as this pepper plant is starting to perk back up too as well. Now I just moved the squash plant that I'd moved over there, which was no longer in the shade, I moved it over here, so hopefully it'll get more shade. But everything is looking really good. The cucumber plant underneath here kind of perked back up by being in the shade. It appreciated a little bit of the shade, and these are still all doing really, really well. And then our cantaloupe that's in full sun is still doing pretty good. I might put a little shade cloth on it, but I think I'm just gonna leave it open just because the sun isn't that bad, but we will see. The roselle is getting a lot of full sun too as well. Now the other thing I moved were my starts because I didn't want them to be in the full sun, and just in case I get busy with work, I don't want to forget those. So that is the 2 o'clock update and how we're trying to take advantage of this cloudy day. Alright guys, so it's 5 o'clock and now the garden is in full shade again. As you can see, that little guy perked back up. But these are over here. I'm going to move these back to the table so that nothing eats them or bothers them. And we are going to take all the shade cloth off and just let the garden be. So as you guys can see, the sun really rotates in my garden. So I try and do things to take advantage of cloudy days so that then I can get the most sun that I can, direct sun that I can on those plants. Now the sun is going to shift and I'm going to get more sun in my garden later on in the summer, but the problem is that it's going to be super hot. So getting my plants to a point to where they're strong enough to be able to handle that heat and not need as much sunlight, that way I can have the shade cloth over it all the time and it's not like in a state of like trying to grow or anything like that. Really, it's just basically just producing its fruit and just trying to make its fruit healthy and good for me to eat and for it to reproduce. So that's kind of like been my focus right now. Now, not all the time do I get to take advantage of these cloudy days where I can leave the shade cloth off of it. So having the shade cloth on it is pretty much mostly is what's happening during this part of the summer. But when I can, I try and take advantage of it. So I suggest that maybe you guys can too if you don't have a full sun garden. Now, if you have a full sun garden and it's giving you 8 hours of sun a day, go ahead, keep your shade cloth up. Don't worry about it because you're getting enough sun for your garden. But for people that are maybe not having a full sun garden, this is another thing that you can do. So I hope that helps. I hope it gives you kind of like a little bit of more of an insight of how my garden works. Like I said, I don't do this every single day, just days that I can take advantage of it. Most of the time my garden has its shade cloth up and I'm just like, don't burn up. But getting it to a point to where it's nice and healthy is my main thing as a gardener, so I thought I'd share that with you guys. But until next time, make sure you guys grow yourselves a garden because even a small space can provide you with tons of food. Bye guys!